My mother was holding her wine glass the way she used to hold a curling iron over my hair when I was 8. Tight. Possessive. Like the thing in her hand might burn someone if she wasn't careful, and she didn't really care which one of us it was. The chandelier above the dining table was the same one from my childhood. Crystal teardrops, 3 of them missing on the left side because my brother threw a baseball through the foyer window in 2003, and the contractor knocked into the fixture when he came to fix the glass. Nobody ever replaced those teardrops. I'd stared at the empty hooks every Sunday dinner for almost 20 years, and somehow, it still bothered me more than anything else in the room. More than my father pretending to enjoy his soup, more than my brother's wife scrolling her phone under the table like a teenager, more than the fact that there was a man in a charcoal suit sitting at the foot of the table who I had never seen before in my life and who my parents had introduced as a family friend here to help us all get on the same page. I knew exactly who he was. I'd known since the moment I pulled into the driveway and saw the rented Lincoln Town car parked behind my father's Buick. I knew the firm. I knew the kind of paper he carried in that leather portfolio leaning against his chair leg. I knew because I'd spent the last 4 months making sure I would know. I took a small sip of water and asked him what his name was again. He smiled. Howard Pemberton, from Pemberton and Reese. That's interesting, I said, because Pemberton and Reese dissolved in 2019. The room went quiet in that very particular way that only my parents' dining room ever goes quiet. Like the air gets thicker. Like the walls remember every fight that's ever happened in that house. And they're leaning in for the next one. My mother laughed too loudly. Don't be silly, sweetheart. Howard's been the family attorney for years. You just don't remember because you've been so wrapped up in your work. My father didn't laugh. My father stared at his soup spoon. Let me back up. My name doesn't really matter for this, but I'll tell you anyway. My name is Whitney. I'm 31 years old. I work as a senior associate at a law firm in Hartford, Connecticut, and I specialize in trust and estate litigation. That last part is important. I'll come back to it. I grew up in a 5-bedroom colonial in a town outside of Providence that I won't name because it's small enough that naming it would identify everyone involved. My father owned 3 carpet showrooms that he inherited from his father and ran into the ground over the course of about 15 years. My mother never worked. My older brother, who I'll just call my brother because saying his name still makes my jaw clench, was the kind of kid who got a new car for graduating high school and then totaled it 3 weeks later and got another new car. That kind of kid. And then there was my grandmother, my mother's mother. Her name was Iris, and she was the only adult in my entire childhood who ever looked at me like I was a real person and not a piece of furniture that occasionally needed dusting. My grandmother lived in a stone house in the Berkshires that her own father had built in 1924. She had cats. She had a vegetable garden that she tended in a sun hat shaped like a giant lampshade. She had a piano in the parlor that nobody played but her, and she would let me sit next to her on the bench while she worked through Chopin nocturnes that I now realize she wasn't very good at, but which I thought, at 6 years old, were the most beautiful sounds in the universe. She had money, not movie money, not yacht money, but enough. Her late husband had been an executive at a paper company in Springfield, and there had been pensions, and there had been investments, and there had been a brokerage account that had been quietly compounding for the better part of 40 years. When I was 12, my grandmother took me out to the porch one evening and told me that she had been watching how my parents treated me and how they treated my brother, and that it had broken something in her, and that she had decided I was going to be okay, no matter what. I didn't know what she meant. I thought she was just being sentimental. She was 73 then. She would die 9 years later of a stroke, alone in her stone house on a Tuesday morning in March. The will was straightforward. My brother got a watch that had belonged to my grandfather. My mother got a set of pearls and a piece of land in Vermont that nobody had ever set foot on, and I got everything else. The house, the brokerage account, a small collection of paintings including 2 early career John Marin watercolors that I would later learn were worth, conservatively, $400,000 apiece. I was 22. I was in my first year of law school. I was completely unprepared. My parents were not unprepared. My parents had been waiting for that moment for a long time. In the 6 months after the funeral, I was systematically pressured, guilted, screamed at, and emotionally cornered into agreeing that the family should manage the estate together until I was more stable. My father suggested I sign a limited power of attorney that would let him handle the brokerage account so that I could focus on school. My mother cried at the kitchen table and told me that my grandmother had clearly been senile at the end and that the will was unfair to everyone. My brother showed up at my dorm and asked me, point blank, to give him $300,000 because he had some debts. I want to be clear about something. I almost did it. I almost signed. I almost handed everything over. What stopped me was a professor named Dean Galloway who taught my fiduciary duties seminar that spring, who, after I asked an oddly specific hypothetical question during office hours, looked at me over the rim of his glasses for a long moment and said, "Whitney, I think you should talk to someone about your situation. Not me, a litigator, a real one. And I think you should do it this week." I did. And the litigator I talked to, a woman named Constance who had a corner office and a voice like cold gravel, listened to me describe my family for 45 minutes and then said, "Honey, you need to get every single asset out of their reach before they figure out how to legally take it from you. Today, not tomorrow." So that's what I did. I won't bore you with the specifics. Irrevocable trust. Out-of-state trustee. Brokerage relationships transferred. Real estate transferred. Insurance restructured. I lost a girlhood and an inheritance in roughly the same 6-week window. And at the end of it, I was 22 and a half years old, sitting in a one-bedroom apartment in New Haven with a folder of legal documents that essentially said, nobody can touch what's yours, not even you, without a lot of paperwork. My parents found out about 4 months later. The fight was so bad my father didn't speak to me for the entire 2017 calendar year. My mother sent me a Christmas card that year with no message inside. Just her signature. I thought it was over. It was not over. What happened over the next 9 years is that my family slowly, methodically rebuilt the appearance of a relationship with me. Holiday dinners. Birthday phone calls. A weekend at the lake house in 2021 that my mother orchestrated with a full guest list and a hired photographer. She started calling me sweetheart again. My father started asking about my career. I let them back in. I want to be honest about that. I let them back in because I was lonely, and because I missed the version of a family that I'd never actually had, and because some part of me, the 12-year-old part of me who sat on a piano bench with my grandmother, still wanted to believe that people could change. What I didn't know, until about a year ago, was that my brother had gotten himself into serious trouble. Not the usual trouble, real trouble. A failed real estate investment with people who do not write strongly worded letters when they don't get paid back. He owed somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 million to a man in Boston whose name I will not say out loud even now, and he had been telling that man for over a year that his sister was about to release a large family trust to him. I learned this from a paralegal named Brandy, who used to work at a firm in Boston that my brother had briefly consulted. She tracked me down on LinkedIn. She told me she had seen documents. She told me my name was on them. That phone call was on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I was at Constance's office, which was now her own firm, with all the documents she had originally drafted for me, plus everything I could pull from public records about my brother's recent legal activity. By Friday, I had hired a private investigator and a forensic accountant. By the following Monday, I had quietly begun the longest, most patient project of my entire adult life. I started saying yes to my parents. I came home for Easter. I went to my mother's birthday brunch. I let my father take me golfing, even though I hate golfing. Even though every shot I took felt like a small humiliation. I brought wine to Sunday dinners. I sent my mother flowers on her anniversary. I asked about my brother and let my mother give me the carefully edited updates that I knew were not true. I nodded. I smiled. I sipped. And while I did, I made a record of everything. Every text message, every voicemail, every casual mention of the trust and Iris's estate and what your grandmother would have wanted. Every time my mother said, "We're family, we don't need lawyers between us." Every time my father said, "Your grandmother always intended for this to be shared." Every time my brother made an offhand joke about how nice it would be if I would just loosen up about the money. I took notes. I time-stamped them. I forwarded the text to a personal email account on the server my family did not know existed. I started recording calls with full legal cover under Connecticut's one-party consent statute. I built over 14 months, the kind of evidentiary record that I would have killed for back in my first year of practice. And then, 3 months ago, my mother called and asked me to come home for Sunday dinner because we have some things to discuss as a family. I knew. I knew the second she said it. I had been waiting for the call for over a year. I said yes, So that's how I ended up at the dining room table on a Sunday evening in late October, looking at a man named Howard Pemberton, who I knew was not Howard Pemberton, how I knew was not Howard Pemberton, asking him to tell me his name again. After I mentioned that Pemberton and Reese had dissolved in 2019, my mother set down her wine glass and folded her hands in front of her plate. She did the smile she does, the one where the corners of her mouth go up, but her eyes stay completely flat. Whitney, you've always been so suspicious. Howard moved firms. He's at a different firm now. It doesn't change who he is. What firm? I said. Pardon? What firm is he at now? Howard, or whoever he was, started to answer, but my mother cut him off. It doesn't matter, dear. We're not here to interview him. We're here as a family. To discuss what? I asked. My father cleared his throat. He still hadn't looked at me. He was working on a bread roll like it had personally insulted him. Whitney, honey, my mother said, there's been a development with your brother. A medical development. He's sick. He's had a real wake-up call. He's been seeing a doctor. He's been seeing a counselor. He's making changes. Real changes. And we feel, your father and I, that as a family, we have an opportunity to help him in a way that would also be a tax-advantaged decision for everyone. I almost laughed. Tax-advantaged. My mother once asked me, in 2019, what the word annuity meant. What kind of decision? I asked. She slid an envelope across the table. It was thick. Cream-colored cardstock. A wax seal on the back because, of course, there was a wax seal, because my mother thinks props are how you make a thing official. Howard has drafted a beautiful document, she said. A simple amendment to Iris's trust. Nothing dramatic. Just a recognition, at long last, of what your grandmother truly wanted. A more equal distribution among all her grandchildren, the way it should have been from the start. I looked at the envelope. I did not pick it up. Mom, I said. Grandma's trust was finalized in 2014. She executed it personally. It was witnessed and notarized. It cannot be amended by anyone, including me. It is irrevocable. That is what irrevocable means. She smiled wider. Howard says there's a procedure. There isn't. Howard says there's a procedure. There isn't. Howard says there is. I looked at Howard. Howard had the decency to look uncomfortable. Whitney, my father said finally lifting his eyes from the bread. Your brother is going to die if we don't help him. Do you understand that? Real people. Real debts. He has a 4-year-old son. He did not have a 4-year-old son. He has a 4-year-old son. He did not have a 4-year-old son. He had a 6-year-old son. My father did not know how old his own grandson was. I noted it. I would write it down in my car. Dad, I said, I'm sorry he's in trouble. I am. But this trust isn't mine to give away. The trustee in Delaware administers it. I can't even withdraw a principal without a documented hardship review, and frankly, my brother's gambling debts don't qualify. It's not gambling, my mother snapped. What is it then? It's a business misunderstanding. The man at the foot of the table cleared his throat. If I may, the document I've prepared isn't an amendment so much as a clarifying instrument, a family settlement agreement. It would simply express the intent of all named beneficiaries to redistribute certain assets in light of new circumstances. It's quite common. It's not common, I said. It's also not legal in Connecticut without the trustee's consent, and the trustee is a corporate fiduciary. They will not consent. They will if you ask them to, my mother said. I won't ask them to. She set her napkin on the table. I watched her do it. She set it down the way a poker player sets down a hand they think is unbeatable. Whitney, she said, I think you misunderstand the situation. She nodded at my brother, who I realized only then had not said a single word the entire meal, had not even greeted me when I walked in. He stood up. He went to the sideboard. He came back with a manila folder. He slid it across the table. I opened it. The first page was a photograph, a grainy, black and white still from what looked like a hotel security camera. The date stamp said August 14, 2022. The location was the lobby of a hotel in Saratoga Springs, New York. The image showed me, in a green dress I remembered very specifically, walking through the lobby next to a man who was very much not my husband, whose hand was on the small of my back, who was also very much not single, as he was a partner at my firm, and as his wife was, at that moment, almost certainly at home with their 2 children in West Hartford. I had ended that, by the way. 3 months after that photo was taken, I had ended it because I was disgusted with myself, because I was disgusted with him, because it was the lowest point of my entire adult life, and I had been quietly trying to claw my way out of the shame of it ever since. I looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then I looked up at my mother. "How did you get this?" She didn't answer. She just kept smiling. "How did you get this?" I said again, slower. "Whitney," she said in her most patient voice, "your firm has a very strict policy on partner-associate relationships, doesn't it? And your husband, of course, and his family, and our family. Imagine what people would say. I asked you how you got this." My brother spoke finally. "Does it really matter how we got it, sis? Matters what we do with it." I closed the folder. I placed my hands flat on the table. I felt, in that moment, two completely separate things at the same time. I felt the kind of cold, oxygenated fury that I have only felt maybe 3 times in my life. And I felt something close to gratitude. Because I had been worried, going into that dinner, that they might be reasonable, that they might appeal to me, that they might cry or apologize or tell me they loved me, and that I might falter. They had taken that worry off the table for me. "Let me make sure I understand," I said, very calmly. "You are threatening to expose a personal matter from 3 years ago in order to coerce me into signing a document that would transfer assets from a federally registered irrevocable trust to my brother. Is that what's happening here?" "Don't be dramatic," my mother said. "This is a family conversation." "It's not, though, Whitney. It's a felony." The man at the foot of the table, the one calling himself Howard, made a small sound and shifted in his seat. "It's specifically called coercion of a beneficiary," I said. "It's also extortion. It's also, if I had to guess, conspiracy, because there are 4 of you sitting at this table who appear to have planned it together. And if Howard there is not actually licensed to practice law in this state, which I am about 95% confident he is not, we can add unlawful practice of law and probably fraud to the list." "Whitney, stop," my father said. "I haven't started." My mother's smile finally broke. Her mouth did this thing where it pulled sideways, the way it used to when I was a kid, and I had done something that embarrassed her in front of other adults. "After everything we have done for you, after everything we have done for you, after everything we sacrificed, you sit here and you threaten us." "I'm not threatening you, Mom. I'm telling you what just happened, out loud, so that everyone in the room hears it the same way." I reached down to the bag at my feet. I had brought a tote bag, the kind I bring to every family dinner, with a bottle of wine and a small loaf of sourdough from a bakery I like in West Hartford. I had also brought, today, a folder of my own. I pulled it out. I set it on the table. I opened it. The first document was a copy of the trust instrument, highlighted in 3 places. The second was a printout of a Massachusetts Bar Association directory page. There was no Howard Pemberton listed, anywhere, in the state. The third was a complaint, drafted but not yet filed, with the Office of the Attorney General of the State of Connecticut, alleging coercion, conspiracy, and the unauthorized practice of law. The name of the firm at the top was Constance's firm. The signature line had Constance's name typed beneath it. Above her name was a date that was scheduled for the following Wednesday. The fourth was a thicker stack. Transcripts, voicemail transcripts, email transcripts, a printed text message conversation between my mother and my brother from 6 weeks earlier, in which my brother had written, in plain English, "She'll fold if we hit her with the Saratoga thing." A second text from my mother had said, "I always knew that would come in handy." I let them look. I did not say anything for almost a full minute. The chandelier above us did its slow, almost imperceptible swing in the heating vent. "You have got to be kidding me," my brother said. "No," I said, "I'm not." "How did you get our texts?" my mother whispered. "You sent them to me, Mom." "I did not." "You did. 6 months ago, you meant to send them to him. You sent them to me by accident, and instead of deleting them, you called me 20 minutes later and asked me if I'd been getting any weird messages. Do you remember that?" She did not remember that. I could see it on her face. She had completely forgotten. People who lie often do that. They lose track. I screenshotted them, I said, and I forwarded them to my attorney that afternoon, because I knew, Mom. I have known for over a year. Brandy from Bardini and Hayes called me last August. I have known about the Boston debt. I have known about the meetings you and Dad had with my brother in July. I have known about Howard, who I will note is actually named Joseph Riley, and is a disbarred attorney from Worcester who lost his license in 2018 for embezzling from a paid estate. The man at the foot of the table stood up. He sat back down. He stood up again. Sit, I said. He sat. Now, I said, here's what's going to happen. I am going to take this folder and the photograph and the manila envelope you so kindly provided, and I'm going to walk out of this house. The complaint will be filed Wednesday morning. Whether or not it includes the additional charges, the ones involving the photograph and the coercion, depends entirely on whether the four of you are still in this room when I drive away. Because if you are, I will assume you intend to continue pursuing this. And if you are not, I will assume that we have all agreed that tonight did not happen. Whitney, please, my mother said. Her voice had gone thin. It had gone the way it used to go when she had pushed too hard and a real adult was about to walk into the room. There's one more thing, I said. I want you to know that the photograph doesn't actually have any leverage. I told my husband about Saratoga 18 months ago. We did marriage counseling for a year. We're fine. I told my firm last spring. They put a formal note in my file, and I no longer work on any matter that touches that partner. He took a leave of absence in June. His wife knows. Everyone who matters knows. The only people in the world who did not know, until 30 minutes ago, were the people sitting at this table. My mother made a sound. I won't describe it. You bluffed with an empty hand, Mom, I said. On purpose, I think. I think some part of you wanted to find out if I would still flinch. I did not flinch. I stood up. I picked up the tote bag. My father, who still had not looked at me directly the entire meal, finally raised his eyes. Whitney, he said, we're your parents. You stopped being that a very long time ago, I said. I just took longer than I should have to notice. I walked out. I did not slam the door. I did not cry in the driveway. I did not look back at the house. I got in my car and I drove 20 minutes to a diner I had loved as a teenager, and I sat in a booth and I ordered a grilled cheese and I called Constance. She picked up on the second ring. Did they do it? She asked. They did it. All of it. All of it. The fake attorney. The photograph. The whole thing. She exhaled slowly on the other end of the line. We file Wednesday. We file Wednesday. The complaint was filed. The investigation moved faster than I expected, because the disbarred attorney, the one calling himself Howard, flipped within about a week. He gave a sworn statement about who hired him, what they paid him, what they instructed him to do. He named my mother as the primary organizer. He named my brother as the source of the funds. He named my father as present in 2 of the planning meetings. My brother was indicted on 4 counts, including conspiracy and extortion. He took a plea. He is serving 4 years at a medium security facility in eastern Massachusetts. His debts in Boston, I have heard, were resolved by the federal seizure of certain assets I will not discuss here. Whatever was left of his life is being managed by his lawyer. My mother was indicted on 3 counts. She did not take a plea. She went to trial. She lost. She is serving 2 years. My father was offered immunity in exchange for testimony. He took it. He testified against my mother. They are separated. He lives now in a 1-bedroom condo in Cranston, Rhode Island. He has sent me 4 letters since the trial ended. I have not opened any of them. They sit in a wooden box on the top shelf of my closet, and one day I might burn them, and one day I might read them, and I have not yet decided which. The disbarred attorney, the man calling himself Howard, was charged separately and is awaiting sentencing. The trust is intact. The house in the Berkshires is mine. I spent a week up there last August. I sat on my grandmother's porch every evening and I drank tea out of the cup she used to drink tea out of, and I listened to the wind move through the pines the way I used to listen to it when I was a child. The piano in the parlor needs tuning. I'm going to have someone come out next month. I have not spoken to my brother. I do not plan to. My husband is fine. My marriage is fine. The version of myself that walked into a hotel in Saratoga Springs in 2022 is a person I am not proud of. But she is also a person I understand. She was lonely. She was tired. She thought she had to earn things she had always deserved. I have made peace with her, and I have moved past her, and the people who tried to weaponize her against me failed. Sometimes I think about the chandelier in my parents' dining room, the 3 missing teardrops on the left side, the way nobody ever fixed them in 20 years. I think about how my mother could plan a coercion scheme for over a year, with multiple co-conspirators and a fraudulent attorney and a hotel photograph she somehow obtained from God knows where. But she could not be bothered, in 2 decades, to replace 3 small pieces of crystal in the light fixture she ate dinner under every single night. That, to me, is the whole story. That's who she always was. She had time for what hurt people. She had no time for what made things beautiful. My grandmother knew. My grandmother always knew. The house in the Berkshires has a porch swing on the back deck. I sit there sometimes, in the evening with a glass of wine that I do not grip too tightly, and I watch the light come down through the trees, and I think about a woman in a sun hat shaped like a lampshade who told me one summer night when I was 12 that I was going to be okay no matter what. She was right. I am. I sat on that porch in the Berkshires for a long time after the trial ended, and I tried to figure out where the line was. The line between a family that hurts you by accident and a family that hurts you on purpose. I used to think the difference was somewhere in the middle, somewhere blurry. I don't think that anymore. I think you can usually tell which side you're on by how the other side reacts when you finally protect yourself. My grandmother Iris saw it in my parents 20 years before I did. She made her choices accordingly. She set up a trust she knew they could not touch, and she told me on a porch a lot like this one that I would be okay. She did not say I would be lucky. She said I would be okay. There is a difference, and the difference is in the work. What I have learned, slowly, is that nothing about my life would have ended well if I had only had one of 3 things, and not all 3 of them. I needed the moral clarity to know that what my parents were doing was wrong, not complicated, not nuanced, just wrong. I needed the intelligence to build a record, a quiet, careful, almost boring record over 14 months of dinners and birthdays and pretend forgiveness. And I needed the endurance to keep showing up at that house when every cell in my body wanted to drive in the opposite direction. Any one of those things by itself would not have saved me. Outrage without evidence would have made me look hysterical. Evidence without follow-through would have sat in a folder forever. Endurance without a moral compass would have just turned me into them. Eventually, in some other form. When my mother slid that photograph across the table, she was betting on something specific. She was betting that shame was stronger than principle. People who manipulate other people for a living almost always make that bet, and they almost always win it. Because most of us were raised to fear being seen more than we were raised to value being right. The only reason I did not flinch in that dining room was that I had done the unglamorous work of telling the truth, in advance, to the small handful of people who actually mattered. My husband, my firm, myself. There was nothing left for her to detonate. That is the part nobody tells you about protecting yourself from your own family. The protection starts long before the confrontation. It starts with the conversations you don't want to have, with the people you don't want to disappoint, in the rooms you would rather walk out of. I am 31 years old now. I have a house with a piano in it. I have a marriage I had to rebuild from the studs up. I have a career I had to defend, and a name I had to clear, and a grandmother who was buried in a small cemetery outside of Pittsfield. I visit her in the spring. I bring her tulips. I tell her thank you every time out loud because she was the only adult in my childhood who taught me that being kind to yourself was not the same thing as being weak. I think about her often. I think she would have liked the porch the way it looks now.